What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video. Today we're going to be going over main tank builds for the Sunspire bosses. So quick disclaimer here, these are builds that I use in Mayflower when I main tank for them. It's not very often that I do so, but I do main tank for Mayflower as well as Hellfire Dominion on occasion whenever we do Sunspire hard mode. And this is the setup that I typically use for those two guilds. So these builds are kind of geared around those two guilds. It's not a kind of hard cut. This is exactly what you must run in every single Sunspire hard mode or Sunspire vet run ever. This is just sort of kind of giving you guys an idea of the build that I run and kind of how I kind of use it to the best that I can. So we're going to start things off with Lokkestiiz, then we'll move on to Yolnahkriin, and then Naviintaas. All three bosses do require a little bit of a different setup here because of sort of various mechanics and fight strategies that you will commonly see being used in Sunspire hard mode progression groups. So starting off first with our Lokkestiiz build. So for Lokkestiiz, a lot of main tanks are actually stepping away from Lokkestiiz, allowing them to use Frostbolt and using defensive posture to reflect it back at Lokkestiiz. It helps improves group DPS, and it's relatively low risk because all you have to do is just make sure you're maintaining enough stamina to use your defensive posture enough. So we have a couple of tools to help us out with that. We're a little bit too far away from the group to really be of much help, so we're not really using Symphony of Blades here. Instead, we're going to be using Stonekeeper. That just helps us with our sustain. Basically, what you do is you basically just need to block attacks in order to proc it. So you don't need to hold block the whole time while you're reflecting it, but I raise block whenever a Frostbolt comes up, so that way I raise it for that second in order to get that proc going from Stonekeeper, and then move on from there. So I like Stonekeeper because it's probably the best way to sustain yourself in the back there. If you don't have a Templar healer that's not able to throw shards towards you, for example, or you can't get any orbs for stem sustain, Stonekeeper is a really good tool. If you don't feel like you need sustain from Stonekeeper, you can run Symphony of Blades. Just bear in mind that you're going to be quite a ways from the DPS group, so whatever heal you're using to proc Symphony of Blades needs to be able to reach that DPS group, which might be far away. So just keep that in mind, depending on where your DPS are placing themselves in relation to where you're standing. They might be a little bit too far for your typical healing abilities. Just keep that in mind if you do want to run Symphony of Blades. The one set that's pretty much always going to remain constant throughout each of these three different boss fights is Yolnahkriin for the Minor Courage. You get the Minor Aegis as well. You will be taking more damage in the off tank, so it's always nice to have that additional mitigation there from the Minor Aegis with Yolnahkriin. The second set really depends on your specific group. So in this instance, we're running Dragon, mainly because there's not many other good sets that we can run. You could run Hircine, you could run Worm, you could run Torok's Pact, you might run more like Tong, depending on how many stamina DPS are in group. So check out the gear video, I have it linked in the description below, for all the different sets that you might want to have on hand. Each raid group does do it a little bit differently for Mayflower and as well as for Hellfire Dominion. We both end up using Akaviri Dragonguard as our second set, mainly because there's no really other good option. Particularly for the Lokkestiiz fight, depending on where DPS are standing in relation to the tank, they might be too far away for Eben or for Worm or Hircine to really have any effect, so you wouldn't necessarily want to run those sets because there will be a limited group benefit while Lokkestiiz is on the ground, depending on where DPS are placed. I have an ice staff on the back bar. You can go with the lightning staff, of course. You can also obviously have your sword board on the front bar. Back bar is kind of up to you what kind of weapon you like. I'm always a fan favorite of ice staff just because in case I get caught on the back bar, I do have a little bit of additional mitigation. Your Blockade is not really going to be able to reach Lokkestiiz. You can always run up, put it down, then drop back if you'd like. So if you want to run the lightning staff for the elemental Blockade, you certainly can. Just bear in mind you will need to step forward, most likely in order to hit him with your elemental blockade and then back out, so that way you don't get hit by his frost breath. A little bit of practice, but it is certainly doable with enough practice. We have an Infused Crusher enchant here, but you might not need to run it depending on who's actually wearing the Torx Crusher enchant. So for example, in my groups, typically it's the off-tank that's wearing it, so we would not normally be running the Crusher enchant. Not a big deal if you are, it's just going to get overwritten by the Torx Crusher, but because it's redundant, you might want to replace it with something else, maybe like an Absorb Stamina enchant to help out your sustain if you feel like you need it to help sustain your defensive posture spamming. Same thing with the front bar enchant and trait. A lot of different options here. I have Infused Crusher, but you can always go with something else. It's kind of up to you how you want to play around with that. Having the second Crusher is beneficial in Lokkestiiz because you'll be able to apply it to more than just one enemy at a time. So you'll be able to apply it to, let's say, 2 Storm Atrionex. So that's useful, but you can always swap it out if you feel the need to do so. Other than that, standard, what you would expect to see on a tank. So we have 3 bracing enchants here. You can replace one with a Magicka regen glyph if you would like. You can run healthy, robust, triune, swift, whatever druid trait you'd like. I just haven't had time or transmutes to transmute all of my tanking jewelry. Sturdy on our small pieces with health enchants. I do have a Divines with a max stamina enchant here. Haven't gotten around to transmuting or replacing that enchant. I have Sturdy on the helm. You can go with Infused if you'd like. I do have Sturdy across the board. I have it Infused on my heavy legs, actually. But I have Prismatics on my pieces here. For Lokkestiiz specifically, I would probably say Sturdy might not be as beneficial because you're not going to be blocking as much. Most of your stamina sustain is actually going to be coming out of using defensive posture so much. So it might not be as worthwhile to run a bunch of Sturdy pieces. It's kind of up to you how you feel about that, because depending on the strategy you use for when the Frost Atrionex come out, you might still be blocking, you might still be taking the Frost Atros, so just keep that in mind. All Sturdy might not be the best option for Lokkestiiz, although you still might want to consider doing it for Yolnahkriin and Naviintaas. Character sheet is what you would expect for a tank. So I'm a Dark Elf. You can run Nord, Imperial, Argonians. Those are the 3 most popular tanking races. Doesn't really matter what race you run as a tank. Same thing with attributes. Attributes are going to vary depending on your race. I'm a Dark Elf. I don't have any max health passives, so I need to put more points into health. You know, if you're an Imperial or Nord, you have health passives, so you might not need to put as many points into health. Just remember the golden rule, which is 35k max health, and try to get above 20k Magicka and stamina. Other things on our character sheet. I'm running the Apprentice here because I usually am the one using Engulfing Flames if I'm the tank. For Lokkestiiz, you're not going to be in range for Engulfing Flames. So if you do need to run Engulfing Flames because you have a lot of Magicka DPS, you're better off getting a Mag Decay or getting your off-tank to run it instead if your off-tank's a Dragon Knight. Other than that, you can pick pretty much your standard array of Mundustone, so Atrionex for the Magicka regen, for example, Steed if you want some more speed, and so on and so forth. So play around with that how you see fit. For food, we're running Bewitched Sugar Skulls for the Tri-Stat bonus, as well as the additional health regen. It's just the best tanking food out there right now. For skills, on our front bar, we have Pierced Armor, Heroic Slash. This is more if you're taking the Frost Atrionex. We still want, obviously, our taunt. We still want Heroic Slash during the Frost Atrionex phases. Igneous Shield to help out with stamina, as well as the shield and Major Mending, obviously. Blue Dragon Blood for a heal. And we have Defensive Stance, which is the key for our Lokkestiiz strategy. Basically allows you to reflect his Frostbolt back at him, dealing a lot of damage and basically freeing you up to do really whatever. It's a really low risk strategy, but if you do happen to miss one, the Frostbolt does hurt if you're not blocking. So just be mindful of that. Make sure you're hitting your defensive posture before each and every Frostbolt. Then we have Reviving Barrier on the front bar, and that's just sort of a backup plan in case one of the healers or whoever is in charge of running barriers for the beam doesn't have it up. It's always nice to have a little bit of a backup plan. It also helps out your Magicka regen, which is always a nice addition. For back bar, you have a lot of flexibility here, mainly because you're a little bit too far away for Elemental Blockade unless you run in, and unless you're running Symphony of Blades and your DPS are pretty much standing right on your side, you're not really going to be able to get your heals going. You obviously have your range taunt. You're going to need it in order to range taunt Lokkestiiz, balance for your Magicka sustain as well as your major resolve buff. Energy Orb for the heal. Depending on how your DPS are lined up in relation to where you are, sometimes DPS are going to be on the opposite side. So if you have, let's say, Dragon, tank is all the way over here, DPS might be on this side, in which case Energy Orb doesn't really help. So flex spot there, but sometimes DPS is actually going to be here, so you're able to kind of shoot an orb down this way in order to get to your DPS, so that's beneficial that way. So it really depends on kind of where your group is set up for Lokkestiiz. I still like it though, because it is actually pretty decent self-heal, because you can just move around, you can like shoot it out kind of horizontal, would it be? Perpendicular to the dragon, I guess, or parallel to the dragon, however you like to say it, and you can just follow the orb along and just take the heal the whole time. Elemental Blockade, if you just to help proc the enchant, and then Purge. Purge is important because the Storm Atronachs can inflict minor vulnerability. They do deal shock damage. So having the efficient Purge will basically help cleanse that minor vulnerability. It might improve overall group survivability, especially during the beam phase, because you will take quite a bit of damage during the beam phase. So it's really good for progression groups to have that efficient Purge going. And obviously aggressive Warhorn. Now again, depending on where your DPS are standing, again, if your dragon's here, you're over here, DPS is over here, you might not be able to get Warhorn from over here, so you might need to move up, do Warhorn, and then move back down. Just be careful when you're moving up towards the dragon, because you might get in Frost Breath range. So that's the Lokkestiiz build. Next, moving on to the Yolnahkriin build. Yolnahkriin build in terms of gear is pretty much exactly the same. The difference is going to be our Mars helm set. Our Mars helm set is going to change over. It's going to change over to Symphony of Blades, because now we're tanking Yolnahkriin. Right? Actually, no. Be that. Do I have? It's going to be Symphony of Blades. Hold on. What? Have it out. I don't. Do I have it on? One. Okay, I don't have it here, but you would normally be wearing Warmother. So the main tank for Yolnahkriin is responsible for pulling the flame HOs underneath Yolnahkriin. One of the best ways to do so is to wear Swarmother. So the 5-piece, or I should say the 2-piece, when you block an attack from an enemy that is further than 8 meters from you, you spin strands of Spider Silk to pull the enemy to you. This effect can occur once every second. So basically what you do is you basically taunt the Flame HOs and then just run underneath the dragon, and Swarmother does the rest. Now, I'll talk about this in a little bit when we go over skills. You will typically be chaining in one. You'll tap target one of the Flame Atronachs and chain that one in, and you'll have Swarmother pick up the second one. But some people just do just the straight taunt and get the Swarmother to do the work. One thing to keep in mind with Swarmother is you can't be blocking preemptively, because then it'll pull, and then they're CC immune, and you can't pull them for I believe it's 8 seconds. So you're standing on the dragon for 8 seconds, and it's not going to be doing anything if you block preemptively. So when you're doing this strategy, just make sure you're not blocking before you're underneath Yolnahkriin. If you're not underneath Yolnahkriin, don't block, otherwise you might end up having CC immune Flame HOs that get angry and explode on top of your DPS. If you're not doing this strategy, for example, let's say you're running just in plain Veteran Sunspire, then you can run something like Symphony of Blades instead to help out your DPS sustain. But for hard mode, you're definitely going to want to run Swarmother. I just don't have it on my tank right now. But the other sets pretty much remain exactly the same, so you're still going to be running Yolnahkriin, and you're still going to be running Dragonguard, or any other set, whatever set that your raid lead wants you to run. Of skills, difference now is going to be coming from here. You don't need a defensive stance anymore, depending on whether your off tank is a DK, if you have a stam DK group. If you have neither, then you're running Stone Giant for the additional stagger debuff. If you have a lot of magic DPS and you don't have a mag DK, you'll be running Engulfing Flames here, because you're basically within melee range now. For your back bar, you will want to have your pull, so for DK it'd be Unrelenting Grip. You'll want your Blockade, and then you want a heal ability. So I have Energy Orb here that'll help proc Symphony if you're running Symphony of Blades. If you're not running Symphony of Blades, you might not need this Energy Orb ability, in which case you can swap it out for whatever ability you'd like, depending on what you need. Other than that though, abilities pretty much remain exactly the same. Again, the strategy for pulling the Flame HOs underneath Yolnahkriin typically is you tap target one of them. Typically it's going to be the closer one. You chain that one under the dragon, and you have Swarmother pull in the second one once you're underneath Yolnahkriin. So you do want to have Unrelenting Grip, or whatever your pull method of pulling things in is. For most classes it's going to be Silverleash. DKs do have Unrelenting Grip, and Wardens can make good use of the portal. Necromancer tanks can also make use of Beckoning Armor. So I personally would not recommend Beckoning Armor, just because, again, you have to run the risk of pulling something in early and having it be CC immune, so then it explodes in your DPS group and everybody is dead. So that's for Yolnahkriin. Not too much of a change. The big change is obviously the change to Maj Helm. So instead of Stonekeeper or Symphony of Blades, you're going to be running Swarm Mother, and then the addition of Chains. Then for Naviintaas, we'll be swapping Maj Helm sets again. This time you will be wearing Vykosa. We want Vykosa because usually you will not be swapping Taunt when Marked for Death comes out. Most groups, progression groups included, will have a healer guarding the main tank during Marked for Death. And you're going to want to have Vykosa here because if he decides to breathe fire on you while you're Marked for Death, you're going to have a bad time. And having that major maim there is really going to help out your overall survivability and keep the healers alive as well. Because the healer's also taking damage because they're guarding you. So really great Maj Helm set to have here. If you feel like you don't need the major maim, then by all means you can go back to Symphony of Blades. Symphony of Blades is pretty much your fallback if you don't need the other Maj Helm sets that I've mentioned earlier. Again, sets pretty much remain exactly the same. Yolnahkriin, Dragonguard. Since you're up in Naviintaas' face, you might run Alkosh, but usually Alkosh will be on a stamina DPS instead. So it's kind of up to you whether you'll need to run Alkosh or not. Again, run it through your raid lead. Check out the gear video to know what other sets you might want to have on hand as a tank. For skills, not much different here compared to Yolnahkriin. So again, either Engulfing Flames or Stone Giant, or Flex, depending on whether you need those two abilities, Engulfing Flames or Stone Giant. On the back bar, again, Energy Orb, not exactly necessary on a DK. You could run Cinderstorm instead, just plop it right down on yourself to get a little bit of a nice heal going for you. But it's always nice to have that there, just help provide some additional synergy for the group. Additional resources, additional heals, never hurts. So I just personally really like running Energy Orb as a tank. But everything else pretty much remains exactly the same. You can swap out Chains if you'd like for something else. It depends on whether or not you are pulling in Flame Hos or not. Usually it's the off-tank's job to pull in Flame Hos, but I've seen a few places where main tank might want to pull in Flame Hos. So you can flex out Unrelenting Grip on an as-needed basis as well. Well, that pretty much concludes these builds. Again, these are not something you should take for as set in stone. These are flexible builds. This is just to give you guys an idea of how you can play or build a tank to kind of tank the dragons in Sunspire. Obviously, listen to your raid lead and swap out sets as needed. Like I mentioned, you might not need to wear Dragonguard. You might be asked to wear something like Hircines, more like Tongs, Taurugs. It all depends on the specific group that you're running with. So just keep an eye, ear opens to your raid lead, and kind of go along with whatever it is that they want you to try out. But that concludes this video. Hopefully you guys found this informative, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.